So similar to last time, if folks could go ahead and put, if you're in a team, please put your team name in your name. That way I can easily sort you into breakout rooms. And if you're not in a team, no worries. You can just leave your name as is and we'll put you in with a group. So that way you can kind of see how these concepts are put into action. So, and if you have any folks that are supposed to be joining us and you don't see them on the participants list, please go ahead and send them a reminder. Just chat me if people need to dial in and I can send you the dial in info or, you know, send them the link if they don't have it. So yeah, feel free to chat me privately if you are trying to get anyone else to join and they haven't joined yet. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Avery, who's going to start the first half of our module, which is going to be about how to plan events. And then the second half of our module is going to be about how to get your social media strategy on point. And so, so Avery, why don't you take it away?
Sure, yeah. So in thinking, well, first of all, I'm Avery Smedley. I'm one of the workers with YAP and the lead organizers of Students Toward Equitable Public Schools. And I'm happy to talk about some of the events that we'll be looking at today. So Luke, if you can go to the next slide, please. So in looking at the different types of events, we found that events kind of typically fall under 4 relevant categories. You've got protests. We might think of typical marches, but also really relevant right now too is car caravans and things like that. And like these times of COVID-19, you've got town halls, which are typically a community forum to hear about community grievances. Say, for example, you might get some police officers and elected officials together to talk about police brutality in your community. Looking at a speakers forum or a panel that's kind of more focused on one particular subject area and getting experts to speak on that. Or you could have a kickoff event, which is more relevant for saying a new organization. You really want to get people excited about the work that you're doing and getting people to join your organization. So it would be great too if folks can type in the chat or maybe even just go off of mute and just talk about what you think is relevant for certain contexts. And that's really one of the things that we're going to be focusing on today. So where do you think like a protest may be more appropriate? Maybe what would be more appropriate for a town hall, things like that. Okay, we can go ahead and look at the next slide. So here are some things that we're going to be keeping in mind and going over: the 5 W's, who, where, what, when, and why, making sure that you have a call to action, a demand, and if this may have something to do with legislation, making sure that it's really relevant to the context of the time that you're in and how to maintain momentum afterwards. Next slide.
Hey everyone, I'm Lily. I'm going to be doing this portion as well with Avery. I'm Director of Outreach for the Youth Activism Project, if you haven't seen me in previous modules. So the 5 W's of organizing, which is what Avery just talked a little bit about, these are kind of the things that you have to focus on at a base level to organize. There's obviously a lot that goes into, you know, an event, a town hall, but this is kind of what you have to focus on to organize with a group of people. So who will be speaking / attending? So kind of how large do you want the event to be? How many people should come? How do you make sure everyone is safe if it's an in-person event? And who will be speaking? So who are the most relevant people that you want to be coming and, you know, talking, whether it be elected officials and things like that. What will be addressed? So crafting your demand, we will talk a little bit more about your call to action, how to craft your demand so it's specific enough, but that's a really important part that you should be initially thinking about. When it will happen and where it will take place, whether it's in person or it's virtual. So obviously now event planning in person is really hypothetical because we don't know when we're going to be able to do that again. But it's very important if you're planning in person, it's very accessible to all people, and it's obviously in a very safe location where you're overemphasizing, you know, how people get there and how people stay safe. And if it's online, you know, make sure you're sharing the link every time you mention the event. And yeah, so why are committees hosting or sponsoring the event? Whether you're an individual or you're hosting an event as a part of an organization, you just want to make sure you are overemphasizing how your call to action and how your demands relate to your goals so as to be the most specific. Next slide. So SMART goals, I know we've talked about it a lot, but again, that's super important and relevant when you're event planning. So your SMART goals are your specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals. And you kind of want to make sure which SMART goals you're publicizing for your event and which ones are the most relevant and what strategies are you proposing. So how are you saying you'll achieve your SMART goals and how are you telling your audience and your attendees what they need to do in order to help you reach your goals. That's super important to be specific enough. And considering the power analysis of your targets, this is really important, especially if you have speakers that are coming to your event or to your panel or whatever the event may be, or if they are going to be speaking at it. You want to make sure that you are evaluating the power analysis of them enough. So an example that I have is, it's not really related to event planning, but when I was lobbying for a healthy vending bill in high school, my group kind of contacted each of our council members, and when we didn't get a great response rate, we kind of looked within their network and figured out who would be the next secondary target that we could talk to figure out where they were at in relation to like how they were thinking about the healthy vending bill. So we were able to contact the chief of staff for one of the council members and set up a meeting with her so we could, you know, read her our statement and tell her our personal stake on the issue. So she was eventually able to relay it back to the council member, and then after a few more steps, the bill was passed. So it's super important that you're correctly analyzing the power dynamic of the people that you're contacting and the people that you're saying your demands to. Avery, I know you had another example.
Yeah, so to give another example of what that may look like, and Lulit and I really wanted to show how it could be different depending on the context. So in my situation, Students Toward Equitable Public Schools, we were working with MoCo Against Brutality, Young People for Progress, a bunch of other groups to kind of work on policing reform. And one of our demands was getting school resource officers out of schools. So in determining our primary target, we were looking at this one vote that happened with the county council. They were the most relevant legislative body. So we were looking to them. And they had this vote where it almost passed by one vote, in which they would have been able to not fill like a few empty police officer positions in schools, and it only missed by one vote. So we were kind of thinking, okay, we only need one primary target. Who can we look to where it might be easiest to flip their vote and get them to not support police officers in schools? So just thinking about based on endorsements, based on people's base, who might be the easiest to flip in terms of that, and then looking at a secondary target that might be folks who can maybe pressure this council member, or council members that may be less susceptible but still easier to move on that issue.
So the next thing is, does pending legislation, no, you can go back to the other slide. Does pending legislation for your issue exist? So that's super important because when you're event planning, for example, in high school, we had an issue with lead in our water in down county schools. And after our county released a statement telling us that there was lead in our water, there was legislation that was kind of not being focused on because it wasn't an issue that was being talked about a lot. So we took that and we used that to build our water quality campaign that took the entire year, and it definitely would have taken much longer if we didn't have that existing information, and we didn't know that stuff was already in the works for it. So it's super important to figure out if pending legislation exists for your issue, but just know that that's not necessarily something that has to exist. If you're not demanding specific legislation, then just make sure you're being super specific about your goals to your targets. You can go to the next slide.
So in thinking about what should organizers be considering when they're having this event, of course, location is really important depending on who you'd like to attend, the particular environment you want to create, thinking about the context, like with your specific community, where do people already gather? And if it's a place where everyone would feel comfortable. Something too that's really important to consider is like be inclusive. So like, for example, if we were to have an event in Montgomery County, we might have it in downtown Silver Spring, which is kind of an epicenter of like the metro and the bus routes, to make it a place where like everyone can come, versus like up county where the transportation may not be as accessible. Thinking about your speakers too, if you want it to be public officials or other community leaders, getting a location that makes sense for them. Thinking about people who are like the best experts on this issue area, or maybe even people who have been personally affected by this area, to really get that emotional side to it. Looking at who should be your co-sponsors and collaborations, thinking about people you're already allied with who also care about this issue. Allying with people and getting co-sponsors offers lots of advantages. You can accrue more resources, attract a larger base. For example, when this collaboration, YCC is definitely more local and can really attract students from all across Montgomery County, whereas we don't necessarily have a huge base in Montgomery County. It's more so national. So just thinking about the different ways that you can work together and attract different people and resources. And then thinking about recruiting, considering the team members that you volunteers who can help you get a wider base, maybe attract people that you wouldn't normally get with your base, and just making sure that everyone has a purpose and everyone can cover like all the bases in terms of outreach.
And before I go into this, I wanted to emphasize a comment that Lynn made. She said, speakers forums / panels are great when you really want to drill down on issues and ensure that advocates are deeply knowledgeable about their issues. They tend to be more focused and are an opportunity to build skills as well as learn more about issues. So we didn't really talk about this, but you know, in what instance you would plan what type of event. But I definitely agree, whereas speaker forums and panels are more for, you know, informing your community about a certain issue and using experts and elected officials to do that. Whereas town halls are more to gauge the opinion of, you know, your student body or your community or whatever group you're trying to appeal to get their opinion on specific legislation or an issue. So it's very important to delineate the difference between those things. So Avery, I know there was a question that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, so as we're thinking about all these different factors that you should consider, I just wanted to ask the audience, how might your demand influence these different factors? You can type in the chat or unmute yourself. So just like considering the different demands that you may have, how might this influence location, speakers, collaborators, etc.? So I guess in thinking about this question, folks can think about, is your demand more local? Is it more national? How does that affect the location of your event? Speakers, co-sponsors, recruiting, thinking about the issue area of your demand too. Is it something that's like very localized? What is this issue area and how does it affect some of these factors?
Can we pause maybe for like, if folks have any questions or comments? Like, I know that, you know, this is a long slog. We're like 5 sessions in, but if folks can, you know, keep the momentum of previous sessions, that would be really great. So do you have any questions or anything people want to share?
I can actually say something.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Avery kind of went over this already, but I was just gonna say, like, depending on your issue, like, there's a certain like target or like demographic that you're trying to reach, and that could kind of determine the location you like host your event on, or the type of speakers, or like who you recruit. But I think Avery kind of like touched on that.
No, yeah, that's a really excellent point. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's definitely something that folks should be thinking about in a way that it can, like, the context can affect all these different factors.
I have just a suggestion. This is Nadia from the Young Leaders Institute. If you guys wanted to ever partner on a training for like legislative literacy or effective advocacy, like understanding the differences between the local, state level, and national level advocacy, I'd be happy to partner with you guys on that.
Thanks so much. That's very good to know.
Nadia, can you drop your email in the chat? We have a request for that.
Sure.
Out of interest, it seems like.
Sure. Okay, no problem. Yeah, we've been doing these trainings for about 5 years now, and it's one of the hotter topics, I would say. So I will do that right now. And
we have Cleo and Ellie also with some questions and comments if you want to uplift that.
Ellie asked what kinds of people / companies would be good co-sponsors and collaborators. So I think Cleo's comment kind of touched on that a little bit. She said, based on who we are targeting or who's going to be affected by the event, you could get co-sponsors or speakers that can relate on a more personal level with the audience. So I very much agree with that, like especially for protests and town halls where, you know, you're getting more of the opinion of your community. You don't necessarily need experts. You just need people who are affected by that issue area to come and speak their personal testaments to the audience. But yeah, it's definitely helpful to contact people like Nadia and Youth Activism Project and YCC to come, at least for publicity, and like, you know, maybe if they can like spare a speaker to come and like talk about the work they do, that could also be helpful.
And yeah, that's a really excellent point. To give you an example that might be helpful, this is where intersectionality is really helpful, and just like looking at the intersections of your work. To go back to that policing example I gave earlier, students toward equitable public schools, we work on education equity, so police reform may not seem exactly in our wheelhouse, but one of the demands that really appealed to us was police officers in schools. So just really looking at maybe folks that you all might not normally be working on the same issue, but you have a particular intersection with this area. Just things like that, being creative and figuring out like the intersections of the different work that you do. And then also, I'm sure that there are lots of people who also work on your issue area. So that's really helpful to use those allies.
I also posted our website for anybody who wants more information. This is Nadia again.
Olivia also left a really great comment about lobbying at the State House or courthouse to garner attention. I think if you're at that level, that could also be super helpful.
I would also say, sorry, this is Olivia, knowing it, like Avery said, if you are going to bring in speakers who have experience with that certain issue area, if you are trying to demand legislation and maybe you're making your demand or appealing to someone who's like a state official or elected official, then if you're going to throw an event or gather in a location, you might have to have a different venue in mind, like a little bit more like an upscale or adult venue, just to make sure that you're kind of playing within their sphere and comfort zone than you would if you were trying to throw like a disability awareness campaign to make an appeal to your principal at your school to make your school more accessible for students with physical disabilities. That might be something that you could do at a school, like at a back to school night. Obviously, you know, that's going to look a little different with COVID circumstances, but just knowing who you're making your demand to and knowing who you're partnering with is really important for determining the kind of event that you're going to host too, which is kind of what Luli and Avery have been saying this entire time. But just like looking at things like the actual venue is really important too.
And I also really liked what you were saying in the chat about how if you are lobbying, then you may want to go to a state house or a courthouse, and just thinking about being context specific. For example, I know in a car caravan protest I participated in a few weeks ago, the demand was, hey, like we want free Wi-Fi for students and teachers. So we drove to one of the Comcast stores and we went there, but it's like very context specific. If you want particular legislation, then you should be going to a state house or a courthouse. So that's really great. And thank you for bringing that up.
If no one has any more comments, I think we can go to the next slide. So tips for organizing a protest. We decided to make this its own thing because it can be kind of different than different types of, formal events. And also that protests are still happening. They're just not being talked about as much, but it's very important to know how to safely execute one. So there's a lot that goes into it, but choosing a theme is super important. What will you use to address and publicize? Something that you can create a tagline or slogan from in order to in better outreach. Establish a support system of other organizations or co-sponsors. So obviously to organize a protest, you don't have to be coming from a specific organization. You can just be an individual who cares about an issue. But either way, reach out to organizations and ask them to spread and publicize at the very least if they don't, want to specifically co-sponsor your event. So, organizations like the Youth Activism Project. Make sure your location is safe, ideally in an area where the issue is prevalent. So for example, all the protests have been happening in gentrified DC neighborhoods, and downtown DC, obviously a very good place to have them and garner a lot of attention. Be sure that your message is inclusive. Your banners, chants, and overall call to action shouldn't alienate anyone. So your representation should be inclusive. So even if you are advocating for a certain group, make sure you are advocating for everyone within that group and they are being represented with the people who are in your protest or your speakers or, your chants, your signs, things like that, your slogan, your tagline, and make sure when you're advertising the event that you say that it's inclusive. And keep the peace. Obviously, your supporters and attendees should be as safe as possible. Safety is first, and make sure you're taking the appropriate measures in order to publicize that. Next slide.
So once you've determined what event you're going to have based on your context, what the issue area you're going to focus on is, you really need to look at outreach. The first thing I would emphasize is figuring out the best social media platform for your target demographic. Just as Luke Abed was talking about how your demographic is really important in terms of location, it's also important in terms of which tool you use to reach out to people. So for example, if you want to get voting age adults, you might use Facebook or Twitter, or if you're looking more at the middle school, high school base, you might want to promote more on Instagram and Snapchat. Something else to consider is having an account dedicated to the event. If you do something like this, you can have all the information in one spot, and maybe people who are interested in this one event, this one protest, but not particularly in every single thing that your organization does. This might be really helpful just to streamline the information. And then also too, in forging that allyship, with other groups, you want to follow accounts that share a similar interest area. And then when the time comes, you can share your flyers with them. They can promote your event. It'll attract their base because it's already an issue area that they've indicated interest in. Sharing your flyers with your followers. A tip that Luca does for outreach, he just DMs every single person in his list and asking them to share the flyer. That's really great on your personal and your account for the event or the organization. And then asking those similar groups to share the flyers. I know a tool that we've utilized sometimes is giving people the title of event sponsors. As long as they agree to help do some of the heavy lifting in terms of the outreach, they get the title of event sponsor. You put them on the flyer. And then also to getting respected members of the interest area or community to share the flyer. So thinking about, for example, steps, if we're having a town hall, we might talk to former people on the BOE, people who work in education equity, because they already have that strong following on their social media, and those people are interested in that issue area. Something too that you can utilize on Instagram and Facebook is event countdowns. So just reminding your followers, okay, this is the day of the event. Reminders are crucial. People tend to forget. It's not necessarily malicious. They just have a lot going on. So just reminding people constantly is a great way to get a good turnout. Next slide, please. Some other forms of outreach that you can utilize: word of mouth. It spreads like wildfire, just getting people excited and talking about your event. Community forums, which was a surprise to me. I've been utilizing my neighborhood listserv a lot if I want voting age adults, and surprisingly that helped a lot with getting a huge turnout. So just going to different communities, maybe it'd be a church bulletin, things like that. And then also press releases. This is great if you want to reach a wider audience and really get people excited and talking about your event or your organization. I have an example on the right. This is a press release that Steps did. You can see our logo, making sure people know like it's us. We have a little bit like a blurb about what we do. And then just like kind of explaining what this event is, getting it in publications that are relevant to your demographic. If you want a national group, try to go to bigger organizations, or if it's something smaller, like if I was doing something in Montgomery County, I might talk to Bethesda Beat. So just like thinking about things like that.
Can I quickly just emphasize how important the word of mouth, like spreading your event through word of mouth is? Like, I think it's important to post things on like social media, but actually like Luca's strategy of just sending it to like as many people as possible that you know will be interested or at least can spread the word is critical. Like texting people, like actually like people go to things because they're invited by someone else, right? And so I think many of you are here because someone else invited you. So I just wanted to really stress that point. Not just rely on, okay, like we posted in our social media, that's gonna be enough. That's definitely not the case. Word of mouth, as Avery said, is like wildfire. So.
Okay, so now we're going to go into our first breakout rooms of this module. So before I hand it off to Anika, I just want to explain a little bit. So we kind of wanted to make these so you didn't necessarily need to have a specific piece of legislation you were lobbying for in order to create an event. You just have to be, you care about your specific issue area. So facilitators, if you wanted to use a SMART goal structure or the 5W structure in order to kind of go through these questions, it's more about crafting your demand and your call to action. And, if you get there, figure out what kind of elected officials you perhaps want to speak or just anyone. We talk a little bit about outreach and how you debrief and measure the impact of your success afterwards and kind of keep the momentum, which we also will talk about after the breakout rooms are over. But yeah, Anika.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna be in breakout rooms for quite a bit of time. We're really responding to the feedback that a lot of folks have given us, which is that they like breakout room time, which is great. So I'm gonna go ahead and read out who's gonna be in what breakout room. And if you are not with your team, please let me know so I could make some switches. A note for the STEPS team, because you're such a big team, I thought it would just be easier to spread you all out, and it might be interesting to be in groups with people who are doing different initiatives. So that way you can, I know you all meet every Monday, so you can kind of go back and synthesize that information. Does that work for the STEPS crew? Can you give me a thumbs up if it does? Okay, I don't actually see a lot of your faces. So if your camera is not on and you're okay with putting your camera on, I would highly recommend that, because that makes the breakout experience a lot more valuable. But I also recognize, Zoom fatigue, so do what's comfortable for you. So here are the breakout rooms. Lynn will be facilitating breakout room 1 with Alex Garcia, along with the Fridays for Future crew, Audrey in Madrid. Breakout room 3 is going to be with Avery, Lauren, and Lucienne with Danafis and Nadia. Breakout room 4 is with Obse and Delina and Sarah Ahau. Sarah, do you have anyone else from Collegiate Talk with you today, or are you the only one?
It looks like I'm the only one, but there were supposed to be 3 of us today.
Okay. So one person I put in breakout room 5 just sort of hopped off. So Olivia, I'm gonna have you co-facilitate with Obse and put Andrew in that group as well, if that's cool, just to make things a little bit easier. And then otherwise it'd just be you and one other person. So I'm gonna just do that real quick. All right. And then breakout room 6 is Meraki with Grace and Cleo. Breakout room 7 is Summer with Ava and Amaya. Breakout room 8 is Luca with Amari and Deborah. Breakout room 9 is Luli, Luca, Bed, and Alexandra. Breakout room 10 is JD with Jaslyn and Ellie. So if I named a group that you're a part of and you're supposed to be in that breakout room, let me know now. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms. And I will also go ahead and put the slides in once more so that everyone has access. And you are now getting invites to breakout rooms. Lucienne, can you hear me? Wait. All right, so as folks are like coming back, does anyone want to share kind of what they talked about in their group? Maybe we can start with Olivia. Or Luli, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Oh no, I didn't know they were gonna end that fast. I thought we had 1 minute.
Well, yeah, I mean, I give like the 1 minute so that people get that warning, but maybe I should have done, yeah, anyway. So, Olivia, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. Wait, did someone else want to say something?
I was just going to ask if I should share my screen again.
Oh yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had Delina from Paint Branch who's working with STEPS with Avery, and then I had Andrew from the Fairfield Equitable Schools Coalition, Equitable Public Schools Coalition, and then Sarah from Collegiate Talk. And so we went through the guiding questions. I elaborated kind of more on the guiding questions and gave some examples and my own insight on those. And then I asked for people with projects, and Andrew had a project in the works for an event or something that he could turn into an event. So we went through each guiding question and kind of tailored the answer to the guiding questions to Andrew's event. So his was actually presenting a bill, including several actionable items to make Fairfield schools more equitable in terms of a more inclusive curriculum, more training for teachers, things like that. And then Delina brought in her perspective with removing SROs from schools. So we talked about the kinds of people, the kinds of stakeholders that they could include in their meeting. So the format, the location was kind of already set because Andrew said that they're doing a kind of virtual town hall thing. The Board of Ed has open meetings, so anyone from the community can dial into the meeting. So he and his coalition are bringing forward their bill, and to support that, they're going to back it up with testimonies from teachers they're going to invite. So giving the teacher perspective of why more training is needed. And we were talking about how we can involve stakeholders to make the point about like the driving home the point about the need for a diverse curriculum. So he was going to bring in some students he knows who are of minority race or ethnicity, minority sexual orientation, maybe they're first generation low income students, and just allowing them to give their own 2 cents in the matter. So they're not only targeting like their primary audience of elected officials by going to this Board of Ed meeting, they're also targeting their secondary audience of community members who are going to be at this Board of Ed meeting, because they're among the older voting electorate demographic. And so by moving them with their testimonies and by Andrew making his case, he's already done a bunch of research. I've seen his Instagram page. They have a lot of infographics about why they're actionable items and why this bill should be passed. By moving those kinds of people who have the power to vote in and out different Board of Ed officials, they're really gaining a lot of power, because if they're able to impact the voters, then the voters can then decide that this is a really pressing issue and kind of make a mandate for the elected officials to pass this bill. And if not, like, then they'll vote them out. And we know that the outcome of elections decides the outcome of the legislation. And then getting the word out. We talked about PTSA listservs in order to kind of get teachers on board or attract teachers to come to this meeting. And then we talked about reaching out through the SGA and through Instagram pages in order to attract those minority students who might be able to give their perspectives. And then that kind of touched on the need for tailoring your message and tailoring your outreach methods based on the demographic that you want to reach. And then in Andrew's case, measuring or making sure that his event and his strategies were effective will obviously be seen in whether or not the legislation was passed. And then we talked about more intangible measures of success too, like just overall more buzz about the issue in the community, or getting those kinds of responses, those positive responses from other members of the secondary target. So like after the Board of Ed meeting, having people come up to him or message him in the Zoom and say like, thank you for bringing these people to talk to us. That really made us realize that there are some serious changes that need to be made in Fairfield Public Schools, or even just like getting more cathartic responses from teachers and minority students that he invited. Like, thank you for inviting us to this event. Like, we really felt like our voices were heard. That kind of feedback is really important too. So yeah, that's kind of what we went through in our breakout. And then we also took some questions about how to make sure that other students who might not ordinarily be interested in these kinds of issues, how to get them interested in case you want to kind of grow your initiative and get your voice heard and get your issues heard to a larger group.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like you all had a really, really robust conversation. And yeah, Andrew, really like awesome work that you're doing. I hope you and Delina will stay connected, because you're doing a lot of ed equity work. And so yeah. And that's, Cleo, thanks for sharing that. Like, I love that you're following Andrew's initiative. This is exactly what we're hoping from this training series, these kinds of connections that we're making cross nationally. So let's do one more like quick share out, and then if folks want to put in the chat any questions, any insights, any summaries of what they had, that way we could have someone do the share out, and then we could have everyone, if you want to share anything, please go ahead and put it in the chat. So who would like to hop off of mic and vocally share out?
I could, because I said I was gonna share out for my group. So okay. So I was in like a disability rights group with Lucianne, Avery, and Miss Nadia. And so the issue that we were talking about is that even though students may have 504 plans or IEPs, that they may not, that the school or the school district may not be abiding by that IEP. So we talked about having, going to a board meeting where you have students who experience similar things and having them give their testimonials and their stories about what that was like for them. And then the location would be at the school board meeting, but you have to sign up to testify. But I know that everything is online now, so the location would be online, but it would be at a school board meeting. And then outreach. Oh, the demographics would be students and parents, and reaching students. We talked about social media like flyers, Instagram, maybe infographics, like informational infographics to maybe like reach people who don't necessarily know what an IEP is or who, if you don't experience it, you wouldn't know. So trying to reach another audience besides just the people who are directly affected by it, and also partnering with other disability rights groups. And then for parents, there are a lot of parent support groups and online forums for IUPs, or for parents who have children with special needs. So using that as a networking tool. There are a lot of Facebook community support groups, and then Lucianne suggested PTA meetings and things like that. And so, yeah, that's what we came up with so far.
Amazing. Yeah, I really wish we could have every single group share out, because I would love that conversation to keep going, but we should probably pass it off to JD and Abse for the next half of our presentation. So if folks need to take a break, feel free to go take a bio break, or, get a glass of water or get some food, but we're gonna just, for the sake of time, just keep going. So who am I passing it to?
Oh, actually, I have.
Yeah.
Did you have final thoughts? Sorry, go ahead, Avery.
Oh, just one last slide just to wrap up this whole event planning portion.
There's another slide.
Yep, just one more. So now that we've brainstormed our events and kind of talked about what that looks like, now it's really important to talk about how do you maintain momentum afterwards. So I think often when people think about advocacy and activism, they really think about like the sexy part, like the protesting and the marching and all of that. But actually, that's only a very like minuscule part of it. And the reason that we do this is to create pressure on elected officials or people in power, whoever that may be, to really give you leverage in order to make your demands. So, for example, thinking about like Black Lives Matter protesters, it's not like a good optic for the mayor to see this like in their city. So it gives you the leverage to sit down with them and talk to them and be like, hey, like these are our demands. And if you don't want to see like these uprisings and people clearly like not content with like you in power, then you need to like step up and look at these demands. So yeah, that's like the whole purpose of that. So you really want to continue that pressure. So making sure you're following through on your demand, really looking at that SMART goal framework that we've been talking about. Are your goals specific, measurable, relevant, timely, etc. And then making sure to, when you have these events, you're really accruing lots of people power and a really strong base. So ensuring that you're still like using that people power, giving them something to do, giving them a call to action after your event, whether that be, hey, like, thank you for coming to this town hall. Can you sign this petition? Can you call or write to your elected official? Can you vote for this specific candidate to make sure that we see this through? And then also to continuing relationships with the allies, with the sponsors that helps you put on this event. And then even to making sure that as you're at this event that you're collecting info, building your network, making sure that the people who were at that event can stay with you and really help you to further your demands. And now I'll pass it on to JD and Abse.
Thank you so much. Hey y'all, my name is JD Gorman. I am a leader at YCC. And I'm a senior at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School in the DC area, Montgomery County, Maryland. Opse, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Opsy. I'm a rising sophomore at BCC, and I'm a member of YCC's Grassroots Committee. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Okay. So guys, today we're going to be focusing on using social media effectively. We're mainly going to look at how to use social media effectively for event promotion. However, we will touch on using it effectively for growing your membership and doing fun interactive activities with your current members. And I'm actually going to pass it back to JD, who's going to start us off with some important questions.
All right, so first off, one thing to think about is personally, and go ahead and start lighting up the chat with messages in response to these questions. Which social media apps or platforms do you use most often, right? Whether that be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. I don't know anybody who does advocacy through Snapchat, but if you found a way to make that work, I'd love to hear it. And why might one of those platforms be more effective than another? Another thing that has been touched on earlier is that different programs and different apps are better for different audiences. So, real quick, what do you think? What's the best for teenagers? Luca is on MySpace. Okay, nice.
Even I'm not on MySpace.
I'd love to hear how Luca's been doing his advocacy through MySpace. Yeah, so if you're looking for an older crowd, maybe Facebook is better. If you're looking for more professionals, or Twitter, there's a lot of people on Twitter. Twitter is nice because there's a big range. You'll get the millennials, you'll get older officials, you'll get younger people. Instagram might be more for your younger crowd. Discord, that's interesting. Going for the gamers, good for you. Okay, but yeah, so just some things to think about when you're using social media.
Okay, so in general, like in social media, it's essential to remember that social media platforms often have a lot going on. There's so many things for a person to click on, read, watch, share, and especially it's even worse if that person only has a few minutes. So you want to make sure that your post is eye-catching, interesting, and easy to retain information from. Whether you're posting about like an event or just some general facts about your club or your organization, there are a few things to keep in mind if you guys would take a look at those bulletin points. One of them is the way you phrase your messages. Make sure you use simple and easy to understand buzzwords. So words like try, get, learn, and join are the buzzwords that you want to be using. And when you're phrasing those messages, also try to include words that will hook viewers in along with the buzzwords. And these words that hook viewers in are mostly you statements. So instead of saying, please attend, try something like join us or make sure you come out to our event. And that type of wording can easily get someone's attention, which is really important, especially in this day and age where a lot of issues and causes are being posted about on social media. So you want to make sure that you're one of the posts that a person pays attention to. And then you want to also urge those viewers to spread the word, whether that means telling or texting their friends, reposting if it's on Instagram, retweeting if it's on Twitter, so on and so forth. And try to use your own connections to further promote your events, whether that means politely asking your friends to further promote the event or reaching out to other organizations you know. It really never hurts to ask, and from experience, I can say that most people are cool with it because they too know the struggle of event promoting, especially organizations, so they will likely help you out. And then if you look at the fourth bulletin point, you guys also want to focus on getting specific with your wording. And what I mean by that is make sure you use key terms that relate to your topic. So for example, if you're trying to focus on systemic racism in education, use words like segregated school districts or school to prison pipeline instead of an umbrella term like racial inequity. You want to make sure you're specific enough so that your viewer knows what you're talking about and what you're advocating for or against. And then lastly, aside from the wording of your posts, you want to make sure you post to relevant apps at prime times. We're going to go fully into depth later on about a posting schedule, but for now, you really just want to remember to post when you know you'll get views. And in terms of relevant apps, so if you want to make like a quick reminder for people to RSVP to your event, try to use Twitter or Snapchat because those are like platforms that you can do quick, frequent reminders at. But if you're posting like a full graphic and it's your first graphic about an event you're hosting soon, try to make it a full actual post on a social media platform, whether that's Instagram or Twitter. Just make sure it really stands out and it's not something people can quickly skim over. Yeah, we could go to the next slide.
So here are just some other things to keep in mind. Being short and to the point is always good. You want to make sure you're using positive images is another thing. So when you are using the graphics, make sure everything is, well, of course, everything should be dependent on the message you're trying to send. But if you're trying to get people to come out to an event, if the energy that you want there is for it to be upbeat or high energy, use positive imagery and positive messages to encourage people to come out. An appropriate amount of color in the posts. Also, sometimes people will say use memes or GIFs, but if that's not who you are, don't do that, right? Sometimes that'll work if that's the audience you're trying to get, but that's not always what you're trying to go for. You want to also feature images that make it look like it's a popular thing to do, whatever your club or event is. I have a couple friends who are filmmakers, and they do a great job of making it look like he's filmed a couple of my other friends' concerts who are SoundCloud rappers, and they do a great job of making it look like there's a lot more people there than there actually were. And how they do that is a lot of angles, but making it look even like it's more popular or more sophisticated than it is. So you want to make sure that there's a way for people to be interactive and respond. And when people respond to you, you want to respond to them. You want to make sure that there's a good back and forth. And I guess the main thing is with social media, because people are scrolling through, like think about TikTok. If you're on TikTok, how many TikToks you're watching a day, right? You're just scrolling through, or how many posts. You really want to be able to capture people's attention and cut through with that short bit of time that you have. You want to get their attention, and that's for when you're just scrolling on the feed. And then as far as the graphics and the hashtags, graphics will grab their attention. The message is what they're going to care about. Hashtags are going to take people to either they see their post, click on the hashtag and find more information, or they're on that hashtag and they think, because they're already interested in whatever you have going on or that issue. So for the Black Lives Matter movement, if people are already on the BLM hashtag, then they're already interested, or they should be. And back to the being responsive and making it more than just a post that they see. Because what's nice about social media is you can interact. It's not like a poster or a billboard that's stationary and just there. With social media, there's another person on the other side. It's not just robots. So you can interact with them. And when you interact with somebody, that makes it more human and really grabs their attention a lot better. Other things to think about are using other forms of posting like IGTVs, and then putting your calls to action in and really making them want to learn more. So you can do a quick thing and then grab their attention, make them want to learn more. And yeah, go on to the next slide.
Okay, yeah, those are some really great points, JD. Quick apology to those who couldn't hear me before. I hope you guys can hear me now. Could someone like say jump on and like tell me if they can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of just continuing on from what JD was talking about, in terms of the pictures and links, there also are a few other things to take into consideration. Make sure you have appropriate pictures. JD got into this a little bit, but the appropriate pictures not only means like make sure it relates to your topic, but make sure you have enough symbols and colors without going overboard, you know? You want to make sure your pictures aren't too crowded, especially if they're part of flyers or infographics. And if you have, this would actually be even better, if you have any pictures of your clubs or your organization's meetings and events, try to add those in, because for most people, when they see that great turnout, it makes them think that you guys are more popular, which, as funny as it sounds, is good because it could attract more members. And then you also want to consider links. And the thing about links is, well, really the only thing is you want to minimize the number of clicks it takes to get to your link. Make it easy and fast to get there. So if you're using like Twitter, put the link somewhere in your tweet, whether it's in the middle or in the end. And then if you're using Instagram, try putting it in your bio and mention in your post, whether it's the caption or the flyer, that the link is in the bio. By shortening the steps to get to the link, you're basically making sure that you have more people clicking on that link, which at the end of the day is the goal. You could go.
So real quick, go into the chat again and think of some creative methods that you have seen that people use to get the message across on social media. Like, what's something that you saw and was like, whoa, never seen that one before. That's crazy. QR codes, okay. I like that. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So here are some things to think about. The stories and the Instagram TV, those are nice because they're short and they're quick. And this goes back to, again, that being concise and keeping your message short is key. Being able to cut through like that is really powerful. And if you can make your videos look or sound as professional as possible, that will take you a lot further than you think. And the interesting subjects is you want to find something more than what you've seen floating around, and your initiative should be interesting in and of itself because you're doing it, right? So you are taking part of this initiative and you're interested in it for some reason, right? So show people why you're interested in it and why they should care through video, through posts. Make people feel your passion that you have for it and really display that. If you can make use of these creative features, do it. Instagram now has like the Reels thing, which is like a TikTok like cop off, which I don't even know. Instagram's always like stealing other platforms things, but just tap into anything that you can and vary your content and keep your schedule, which we'll get into a little bit later. Also, using cool editing apps like Premiere Rush is an example, or your friends. Like, you'd be surprised about how many people have dabbled in video editing or cinematography or whatnot. iMovie is crazy. You can do a lot with iMovie. But yeah, music, text, GIFs, anything. The Instagram questions and polls, that's another great way to sort of get into that responsiveness. And then address your audience in the videos and end your videos with a call to action. Stay positive, but also your cinematography can really have the power to drive home a really impactful point and grave points. Also, depending on your initiative, if it's something local, like something within your school, have people in your school that people will see and recognize. So if it's something within your school district, maybe have the Board of Education. If it's something within your school itself, have the principal or the teacher or something. Bring community members, show them, and it creates more of a sense of community the more that you show the community around it. All right, we can go to the next slide. So here are just some different examples of social media posts. You have your regular Instagram, which is great. You have this really nice professional looking post with information on the left. And what's good about this is the information is there and it's a post, so it'll stay there, and people can reference it and go back to it. And what's nice about the one on the right is it's a little more interactive. You see like the seconds counting down and it's like a big thing and da 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 blah blah blah, right? And another good thing about the counter is that people can repost that counter and people can spread the word that way. and it's just a story. So it's not like some people are afraid to like commit to a whole post, and it'll like clutter their feed if that's not their thing. But just a story, it's quick and they can do it and they can interact and they can be a part of it. Yeah, anything that I missed, Obse, before we sort of jump to the next slide?
No, you're good. Yeah, I think we could go on.
Does anybody have questions before Obse goes into explaining the first breakout room or the last breakout room? You can unmute yourself or throw it in the chat.
I think we're good.
Right. Well, if nobody has any questions, Obse, all you to explain the breakout rooms.
Yeah, so we actually have some fun stuff planned for you guys. For the first 10 minutes, for the first activity too, you guys are going to be discussing the questions on the screen. The facilitators will probably pull up the slide and they can open those questions and you guys can start talking about them. And if you finished the first activity early, then feel free to do the second activity, which is a challenge. And for this challenge, for the first 5 minutes or so, you guys are going to be creating practice captions or hashtags using the buzzwords we talked about and call to action words. But you want to make sure that you don't spend all of the last 10 minutes doing those creating those practice captions and hashtags because you want to share with the rest of your group. Yeah, other than that, you guys are set.
All right, we're gonna do the same breakout rooms, except we have a couple of new folks joining. So Gabrielle is going to be joining. If Gabrielle is still here, never mind. I don't think she's here anymore. But we have Grant. Hold on. Okay, all these people that. Grant, are you still here? All right, so never mind. Just ignore that part. We should be in the same groups as last time with the same people. And it looks like we have one question in the chat, so maybe you can address that before I open. So Jaslyn is asking, Jaslyn, can you ask your question again? Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, okay. So, Upsay, did you want to say something?
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna say you can have multiple posts of that, and you can switch it up too. Like JD went into depth earlier, whether it's like an IG TV post or whether it's like a reel or an Instagram story. And you can don't only limit yourself to one social media platform. Feel free to reach out to Twitter, Snapchat, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and one thing I want to emphasize is the idea of like buzzwords or active words. So say like swipe for more. Really need those directions, but yeah, that's a really good idea. So thanks for raising this. All right, so I'm going to open all rooms and we'll be back in about 20 or so minutes. It's been a long day, I'm guessing.
Somebody in my group had a really great idea. So I was with with Lauren and Lucienne and Nadia. And Lucienne had this really great idea to kind of like when you're educating people about language they shouldn't use, maybe using those hashtags because it'll like attract the people that like don't know like not to use that language. We were talking about like disability rights and how like there was this debate over like not to use this hashtag light up blue. So just like using that to attract those people, and then like you're garnering like a larger base, and then using that to then teach them, hey, like don't say this. So I thought that was a great idea.
That's a really great idea. Thanks for uplifting that. And Lucienne, thanks for sharing that. Any final like nuggets of wisdom like that anyone want to share before we close out? Great. Opsi, are you doing the next part?
Yeah, I am. We can go to the next slide. So before we left, we just really quickly wanted to touch up on a posting schedule. And the main thing to keep in mind when you're creating your posting schedule is to keep it consistent. This will be easier if you guys assign 1 or 2 trusted members to be the managers of your clubs or organizations' social media accounts. Then these social media managers can fall into a routine and it'll become easier for everyone. And the main things they want to keep in mind when they're posting is to post at prime times. So weekends are generally better than weekdays. And for both, you want to try posting mid-morning from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and late afternoon from around 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'm not saying you have to post at those times, but those are just the times that most people will likely get the chance to see your posts. And then you want to also make sure you don't post too much, because eventually it might overfill someone's feed and that would annoy them, and you don't want to do that. So for like social media platforms like Twitter and Snapchat, those you can post frequently because they're made for quick, frequent posts. But if you're using like Instagram, try to slow it down and maybe do 1 or 2 official page posts and then do a couple posts on your stories. Just keep it varied and make sure you find that happy medium where you're not posting too much, but you're posting enough to be successful in your promotion efforts. Yeah, and then we can go on to the next slide.
All right. So here are some things to think about if people don't have social media, and these are sort of going back to what was touched on before with the email listservs. Other ways that you can reach out to people are Remind, which will send a text right to their phone, email listservs like community listservs. For I think it was Avery who said she had a lot of luck with saw good results when she used her community listserv. There's also group chats like GroupMe, Slack, WhatsApp, just other ways to get that message out. Also, if your promotion efforts aren't working, consider using your connections that you have, using the friends, getting your friends to shout things out. Maybe maybe I know in Montgomery County we have a student member of the board. If you can get to them, get them to shout it out. Anybody who has a large reach or has a wide net that they can cast. Then also don't be ashamed to get feedback. That feedback is how you improve, and that is the key to becoming better. So get what people think, what people like, what they don't like, and get a sense for how your posts are being received. And then again, word of mouth, huge. Like Anika was saying, it's a big, if you can make your program something that gets spread by word of mouth, that'll do wonders because it becomes something that people are talking about, and then they talk about it more, and then they get interested and they tell more people, and it's something of conversation. Other things to think about is always being interactive, doing your polls. Polls are another good way to get feedback. Instagram Live, so you're creating that interaction between you and people viewing your posts. You can also promote events from other people, sort of a quid pro quo of you do this, I do this, right? So you promote their event, they promote your events. Again, creating that networking. yeah, Instagram posting also can be a way to educate, is another important thing. Like we're seeing a lot now is it's a great way to educate your followers on your initiative rather than just promoting your events. Um, but yeah, is there any questions from anybody? You can go to the next slide that just says questions in a nice pretty font over a big blue background. Any questions from anybody before we close out? You can unmute yourself or throw the question in the chat.
All right, so if there are not any questions, I want to give a huge round of applause to all of our presenters and facilitators for today. Snaps, yay. I just wanted to let folks know in the last couple of minutes, and we can, end a little bit early this time, but I really hope that you got a really comprehensive sense of like how to do event planning and publicity. And I actually have a bit of a practice round, I guess, for you all. So as you know, this is our second to last series in this workshop. And our last workshop is all about how to do a call to action, because all of this that we're learning, what we're doing, it will not amount to anything if you don't know how to actually effectively motivate people to join you in your cause, right? So we are all building up to that. All of these skills are really building up to, here's how you set up a team, here's how you do all the logistics, here's how you tap into your story, here's how you think about event planning, which can be anything, like as we've said, from an introductory sort of event to a protest, to a town hall, right? So whatever sort of like what we're doing right now, this is an event. All of these strategies that we talked about, Youth Activism Project and Youth Creating Change, we all use those strategies in order to try to get people to come out. So we really want to help you with us, like to spread that word. And so I know we've told you like over and over again, like please spread the word, but now we know, now that you're here, we're gonna try to use that as a call to action for you all. We're really trying to get 100 people to come out to our final workshop series. And so if you have other folks in your team that weren't able to make it, please try to hype it up and make sure that they come for our final one. If there are other activists in your community that want to get started but just don't know how, please send them our Zoom link. It'd be great if they RSVP, but we've all built this community now, so feel free to just share that link with people that you know and you trust. The final session is going to be really amazing because it's really going to tap into how exactly you can use storytelling, emotion, and your values to really get people excited and riled up and ready to join your cause. And you want to share that knowledge with as many people as possible. So Avery, can you run a poll and